thank you everyone for joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedules to speak with us and learn more about how teachers can use the Sustainable Development Goals to spark engaging and meaningful discussions and debates in their classrooms. My name is Bobby McDonald. I'm the host and the presenter today, the one who's the expert in the room and the one who's really put a lot of work into this is Ada McKim. So Ada, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for putting this together.
Of course, of course. So just before we get started, I just want to say thank you to everyone at edWeb for all of your hard work in helping us coordinate this and to making this a success. It's been a really seamless process. It's been really great collaborating with you, and we hope to do it again in the future. A reminder that you do get your CE certificate after this webinar. You log in with your email address, and all you have to do is answer a 4-question quiz. It's a really bone-crushing quiz, so I hope you study and take notes thoroughly throughout this presentation. No, I'm just kidding. It's pretty straightforward. Once you've completed the webinar and the quiz, you'll get your certification, courtesy of the fine folks at edWeb.
Can I get a certificate too? That looked really fancy.
Yes, you do. You absolutely do. As the t-shirt. Last but not least, there is a student voice community where this webinar was promoted, and where we're very much aligned with this community on the edweb.net/student voice, and you can see the webinar recordings, this one and other ones that fall under this theme. So check out that URL when you're finished, and yeah. With all that, we'll do some quick introductions. So Ada, why don't you introduce yourself and give a little background, tell us about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Sure, thanks, Bobby. I know everybody can read what is on screen. I just want to say how happy I am to be here today for my first ever webinar that I have presented, and just thrilled that so many people are here. One thing that's not on screen, I guess, is how I got started in this whole world. I teach a course called World Issues, and 7 years ago, my class happened to connect with a group of peers in Uganda, and we started Skyping with one another. The experience was life-changing. Ended up connecting more than 60 schools across North America with peers in Uganda. I went there a few times and really saw the face of extreme poverty in some pretty personal and deep ways. And you know, I'd always been passionate about the issues of the world, but to see some things up close and to really get to know some of the kids in Uganda, you know, transformed my priorities for education and for life. So that really has led me on this journey since.
Awesome, thank you. That's a really nice, touching introduction. My name is Bobby. I'm the founder and CEO of Parlay Ideas. Our firm belief is that conversations can change the world. And in so much as we believe that's possible, we want to help teachers all over the world inspire meaningful discussions so they can teach students how to have the skills for discussions, and that they can use discussions to impact their lives and impact the world. And so everything we do drives towards that. And the original idea for Parlay came about 8 years ago, and we've been a company now for about 2.5 years, going strong, moving forward, like I said, inspiring meaningful class discussions. So with that, I will pass it off to Ada, who is going to get started with our presentation today.
And we're going to start with a poll, actually, something that I do with all my students. And I'm interested to see where you guys land on this. So the poll, I'm told, will appear on screen. 4 questions about extreme poverty. And just to make one quick note about extreme poverty, we don't actually have that in North America and Europe. It's that stupid kind of poverty that causes a kid to starve because they don't have enough food or receive basic medical attention to save their lives. You know, we all see the news. And I'm interested in seeing the polling results on what we think has happened since 1990. And here oh, this is really cool. Look at this. They're all just moving across the screen, and a healthy majority of people are suggesting that extreme poverty has gone up. Again, we certainly see a lot of darkness in the news. I think, it's everybody. That isn't everybody that's voted. So just give you a couple more seconds. Oh my goodness, six people think it has decreased by 50% or more.
The optimists.
I have the power to actually close this poll, so I think that's going to happen right now. So about 69% say that it has increased, and just 9% that it has decreased. This is a story that I love to tell. My friends will say any opportunity I get to tell this tale, and there's a reason why so many of us think that it has gone up by 25% or more, and you'll see that this is quite close to the polling data that the Gates Foundation often publicizes, that the majority of people say it has gone up, with only 1% of people reporting that it has gone down. The reality, however, is that in 1990, we had about 43% of the world in a state of extreme poverty. And in the year 2000, along came the Millennium Development Goals, an effort by the United Nations to bring all countries together and set some targets. And the experts said that the goal of cutting poverty in half by 2015 was impossible. And it turned out they were right. Extreme poverty was not cut in half by 2015. It was cut in half by 2012, early. In fact, it's actually below 10% today. And right now on the other side of these screens, if your jaw is dropped, or if you're having this beautiful little moment that I love to give to anyone I can, where you say, wow, that world out there that seems so dark and unhappy is actually heading in a very positive direction. I think this is the greatest accomplishment of our species. And it's certainly not a war that is won, but it is one that motivates. The neuroscientist Steven Pinker talks about when we see progress, we're more likely to actually engage with the solution. This is the progress we're talking about. I love this graphic from Our World in Data, and it's one that I hold on to every time I see a news story that makes me feel bad. And I realized when I started to follow the work of the Millennium Development Goals that my World Issues course years ago was pretty dark. I had this feeling that my students needed to know these things that were happening in the world, that it would really be unconscionable not to share the stories of humanity. But I forgot to share the hope, because to be honest, I wasn't following the trend lines. And then along came a YouTube video, a TED Talk by a personal hero of mine, Hans Rosling. And if you've not heard of Dr. Rosling, you may want to do a YouTube search yourself, because he is unbelievable. And he tracked the progress that we see across the globe. And he encouraged us to go beyond the news, which has that axiom, if it bleeds, it leads. We as humans are drawn to the negative story. It's why even experts give similar poll results to the ones you do. Students do the same. He likes to joke that we humans always lose to the chimpanzees in these questions, because the chimpanzees make random choices where we make our choices based on preconceived notions, and they overestimate the darkness. I always try to focus on the issues. I've always done that. Big things like climate change or extreme poverty or gender equality. But with Dr. Rosling, I started to focus on trends. And they're positive. And I want you to just take a moment, if you would, to just, breathe this in. Because humanity is doing better than we think it is. And I think our students need to know this. So the first argument in a section on a webinar called The Case for the Global Goals is this: a right to hope, that our students need a little bit of factfulness to counteract the effects of the daily news. This is global. Unfortunately, every nation on Earth would say that the world is getting worse, and there are plenty of things you can point to, and that's a conversation for another day. Hard to argue that climate change is improving, but it's pretty bleak, and I think it affects us. And I think we are in a struggle against fear, that we take single events and broadcast them to the masses, which lead us to feel that all things are dark and frightening. And this can be used by political figures to great effect. I think we owe it to our students to dial down that fear and to use statistics to do so. Fear can be harnessed. This is the pinned tweet on my Twitter feed that says that with an electorate, citizenry, a population that is in a state of fear, they can be steered pretty easily towards hate and fear of the unknown or people that look different than them. And they don't have the stats to back them up. And so, of course, a global education should be solution number one to fight that ignorance. I believe that this series of preconceived notions that our world is falling apart has an effect on us at the deepest levels. Some would say at the level of soul, others simply emotion. But research is actually pointing to, of course, the number of students who experience depression and anxiety is skyrocketing. But more and more students are reporting to these mental health professionals that concerns about the world are part of their mental struggles. So whenever I wish to counteract some of that, I reach for the global goals and show the trend lines and return that hope. We as teachers always say that our young people will have the power to change the world. It's something we go to and say, our kids are going to change the world. But how exactly can they accomplish this if they don't know the issues of the world? What expectation is there without that? So the global goals themselves, we'll talk much more about them as we go forward, but they are this bright, beautiful plan for a better world with 169 achievable targets that every nation on Earth agreed to. And again, when every nation on Earth agrees to something, I think our students should know about that regardless of whether or not it's in our curriculum. And for those who are just coming to the global goals today and wondering, how would one even get started? We'll talk a little bit later with the additional resources. But for me, I like to start with a really inspiring video. And although the United Nations doesn't have much of a marketing budget to make incredible videos, some big fans of the Sustainable Development Goals, they do have that kind of money, attention, and star power. So we're going to fire up a video right now that you may not have seen and you may wish to share, because I think your students and you will find it uplifting and a good intro to the goals. So here is your introduction. Right now. Oh, that was perfect.
We can be.
We must be
The first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
Most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
Goes hungry.
Where no one
wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die of
Diseases we know how to cure.
and where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world where everyone goes to school.
and education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive and be powerful and safe.
we cannot succeed if half the world is held back.
we will live in a world
where all people can get clean water
and proper toilets
At home,
At school,
and at work.
We will live in a world where there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper.
and new wealth.
Leads to decent jobs
for everyone.
and we will live in a world where our industry,
our infrastructure and our
Best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated.
inside our countries,
And between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume.
Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore
and protect
Life on land,
the forests,
Animals,
the earth itself.
with peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people,
Work together
partnerships of all kinds,
to make these goals
a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals.
for sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
I see somebody writing over there that they're tearing up at that video. I've done the same at so many of the videos, and they were asking for the link. The Global Gulls have their own YouTube channel, and you'll find tons of videos on there that will also make you cry. You know, I think that's a good thing, and I think that's something we want from our young people to feel their way into a lesson plan. Because it's only then that you're really going to be engaged to seek the solutions that need to be found and need to be found soon. I challenge those that say that, you know, our young people are the solution finders of the future, that one day that they will be able to serve. One day is today. Our young people are capable of jumping in and coming in with fresh eyes and creativity. They will astound us, and it's such an enjoyable thing to watch. The story of Teach SDGs, if I have control of the slides again. Oh, good, I do. The story of Teach SDGs is, for me, quite an exciting one. I had the good fortune of receiving an education leave, a sabbatical, the whole year of learning, and you know, I already had engaged with the Millennium Development Goals, which expired in 2015. I was impressed with the global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, and already was teaching them with my students. And I knew I wanted to serve the goals in some way during my education leave. So I started looking for the group of teachers that was promoting their use. I knew the resources were out there and that they were good, but I had never encountered a group of educators that all you educators out there, that a company can have phenomenal ideas, governments can have phenomenal ideas, but in order to get things into the classroom and to cut through some of the red tape, it really takes teachers. And so one day on Twitter, I reached out to an Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations who was tweeting a lot about the goals. And I asked him a single question. I said, what is being done to get global goals resources into K-12 classrooms? And to my shock, he responded and said he would look into it. And he followed me on Twitter and messaged me back a week later and said he wasn't satisfied with the answers he was getting. And he didn't know of a team of teachers. I had nothing to lose, so I asked for a Skype session with him, and he said yes. And that conversation went well, and still neither of us could find a team of teachers. I was heading to Philadelphia for a Global Ed conference. This is a couple of years ago now. And I asked Thomas Gass at the UN, I said, can I just swing by New York and let's talk? And he said yes. And a teacher I had worked with on the Uganda project, Amy Rosenstein, who you may know as Skype Amy, came with me. And we talked, and he agreed that he would make UN opportunities available to our group, that doors would be opened. And we agreed that we would build the team. Immediately in Philadelphia, we approached Jen Williams and Francir Kusa, extraordinary educators who I'm sure many of you know. And the four of us went from there, adding teachers from every continent within a few weeks, and then taking to Twitter, taking to different presentations. Anytime any of our people can influence an organization, a government, an event, that's what we do. We are now a group of more than 25,000 educators on Twitter, more than 100 global ambassadors who have committed to go above and beyond on a volunteer basis. We're all volunteers. And almost 2,000 who have taken the pledge, saying that they will use the Sustainable Development Goals in their classes, whether it's in the curriculum or not. But we do point out that even if it's not specifically written in the curriculum, concepts of peace and justice and sustainability and citizenship, they are in your curriculum. So we try to make teachers feel safe to engage with these goals. So it's been quite an adventure. I'm honored to run the Twitter account and to support the work as best I can. But it's critical to know that immediately this became a team effort that just keeps growing and growing. So I would invite you to check us out on our website, on the hashtag, and see what we will point you to. For me, as a high school teacher, just to pivot a little here, I know that my students learn best when we're in a conversation. You may know, if you teach high school, that sometimes getting students to be engaged, it might take a little bit of conversation and debates. So when I heard about Parlay Ideas, and when I learned more about Bobby McDonald and the work that they were doing, I was impressed with their mission to develop, I guess, the skills around conversation that we're losing in the age of social media. We see it with adults and young people alike. I personally think it's a crisis, and I think that discussions about the Sustainable Development Goals or a myriad of other things, it's essential that our students know how to do that better. So I'm going to throw things over to the expert here, our host today. He's been an absolute he's been a pleasure to work with over these last couple of months. So I'm honored. Bobby, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ada. That was a great intro. Your story is really inspiring, in your the path that you took to get to the Sustainable Development Goals, or understanding the Sustainable Development Goals. And the importance of them is one of self-discovery, and it's one where you went out into the world and discovered it, and then you took action on it. So not only do teachers around the world thank you, but you really are a model for students and people everywhere who want to see something, who do see something that they want to make a big change, and then go and work hard to affect that change. The size and scope and engagement of the Teach SDGs community is very much a testament to that hard work and to that commitment. So thank you, and it's been an honor to work with you too.
Thank you.
With all that said, there is the case for the global goals, and then the next one we want to make a case for before we combine the two is the case for discussions. I'm just going to briefly talk about this. We've been spending a long time over the last few years over at Parley doing some research and finding out, just what it is about discussions that makes them so impactful. And to start, I'm going to talk about something that seems to be happening in the world, and that is that at first our views used to overlap. So the chart that you see in front of you, I'm sorry if it's hard to read, is the median views on a wide range of political issues for people who would consider themselves Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. This is U.S. specific data, but of course this kind of trend we see it all over the world, and you can see there's quite a lot of overlap. So that purple zone, that purple overlap between the views of people who are conservative versus liberal, just to use those terms, is quite big. So that's what I like to call the zone of possible agreement, and it's quite large. If we fast forward to 2017, we can't stand each other. All you got to do is turn on 24-hour cable news or go into your social media feed or anything of that sort, and you can see how both camps have moved over into their respective camps, and the zone of possible agreement, that purple overlap, is deteriorating quickly. And it's important to note that this has a direct effect on the quality of our political discourse. It has a direct effect on our ability to work together, to compromise, to cross the aisle, whatever you want to call it, to solve problems. And it's also important to know that this is the world that students are bringing into the classroom, and this is a world that students are growing up in and experiencing every day. This is a really, really interesting graph too. Social media isn't helping. These are retweets from people who have specific political affiliations on a range of issues, specifically political issues. And it shows the retweets between people who are left-leaning and right-leaning, so to speak. And what's amazing here is that there's very little overlap. So it's something that we keep hearing about, and that is that, people with their social media feeds, they fill their social media feeds with people that agree with them, and then they just gorge on confirmation bias for weeks and months and years. And that definitely contributes to that polarization that we see in the world. So this is a really, really big challenge that's in front of us, certainly for democratic societies. How do we foster more meaningful public discourse in this technological age? And that's where we believe that discussions have a unique answer. And discussions, really since antiquity, you'll see the image in the background, discussions have been an integral part of teaching students and young people and encouraging ultimately the citizenry to solve problems. Discussions teach us to share our view. And once we've shared our view, we consider other perspectives. We listen to other people. And in listening to them, we empathize with their perspectives, and we reflect on them. How are our perspectives different? How are they the same? Where can we find common ground and ultimately compromise to solve the problem in front of us? And we do this all together with a collective commitment to the truth, or understanding the truth as best as it is possible. It's often difficult in very human affairs, so that we can all work together to build a better society. This is a fundamental skill that discussion teaches, and it's the foundation. It's a foundational element of democratic society. And indeed, there's two ways that human beings solve problems: through conversation and through violence. And so we firmly believe that it's very important to teach young people early the skills of discussion and conversation. Furthermore, and more to the point of exactly what teachers and administrators are often focused on in the classroom, is that discussion drives learning outcomes. these are some of the research. This is some of the output of a research study done by a gentleman named John Hattie and his team of researchers out of Australia. They published a textbook, which I think is in its 4th or 5th edition now. It's called Visible Learning. And they asked the question, what drives learning outcomes? What actually moves the needle in classrooms? And they reviewed a whole bunch of different strategies that teachers can do, that parents can do, that administrators can do, that students can do, that the education system at large can do, over 250 of them. And of the tools that teachers can implement in the classroom, discussion was in the top 4 or 5, I believe, consistently across all variations of this research study. And it was one of the top 15 that they could do out of 250 in any way. And just look on the screen and you can see how discussion compares to some other really, really important and commonly used tactics for driving student learning outcomes and helping students perform better in school. Now, that's not to say that things like reflection and small group learning and feedback and peer tutoring are not good things to do, and or that these things cannot be done together. But it just helps illustrate the power of a meaningful, well-executed discussion in the classroom. And this was a huge longitudinal study done. Some would say it's probably the most comprehensive one completed in recent memory. All right, last but not least, automation, artificial intelligence, machines, whatever you want to call it, is changing work. It's changing the nature of what it means to be a meaningful contributor to the economy and to the workforce in the future. I really love this graph that I pulled out of an Economist article, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And what it shows is a dramatic rise in a kind of work. And the kind of work that it shows a rise in is called non-routine cognitive work. What does that mean? It means the work that students need to do in the future, need to learn to do in the future, so that they can continue along this trend line. The kind of work that we can that is permitted in a world of automation, where everything that's rote and routine starts to be automated, is the kind of work that requires the skills that you see here, where the World Economic Forum is one example of all these different types of skills that students will need to have and develop in order to be successful in this non-routine cognitive future. And some of them, most of these skills, complex problem solving, critical thinking, coordinating with others, judgment and decision making, negotiation, that cognitive flexibility that comes with knowing that your idea isn't perfect and getting feedback on it, all of these things come through discussion. So with that, I'm going to pass it back off to Ada. But again, it's the changing world of work. It's social polarization, and it's the need to drive learning outcomes. Those are the 3 reasons why we fundamentally believe that education should incorporate more discussion. Over to you, Aidan.
Thank you, Bobby, and thank you for sharing all of that. I know the first time I toured your website and saw all that you had to say and reviewed your story of how you've been so passionate about this since a very young age. It's inspiring, and I do think that we need to be thinking about this a lot more as we steer our students into a new world of work, but also into a new way of thinking about humanity and how we work with each other, because we cannot continue along the discussion path that we've been placed upon by social media and other forces. This next image is one of my favorites. I tweet this from time to time, and I look at it far more often. It's one that always reminds me of what's most important whenever I'm designing a lesson, and it's one I actually think of often when I'm parenting my own 3 daughters. That these are the things I want them to be able to do, and the way that I want them to feel. And I do see a combination here between the Sustainable Development Goals and the power of discussion. So when you asked me, Bobby, if I would make some roundtables for Parley Ideas this summer, I jumped at the chance. I was so excited to be able to pull together some of the things that I've used in World Issues to put into a platform of curated resources and questions and content that would lead to quality discussions surrounding each of the global goals. So it's been an adventure since then. I will say one of the biggest challenges when I started making these roundtables, these 17 things that you debate, I had to think a while on, how do you debate extreme poverty? Of course, everyone in your room is going to say, well, let's defeat that. Climate change, although some still somehow disagree, it's not a debate about whether or not climate change is real. It's fact, and we as teachers need to feel safe to say that it is fact, and not give in to political pressures that speak to the contrary. I do feel this is our role. It's hard to debate these 17. So what I had to do was to drill down into the 169 targets and come up with a question that I thought reasonable people with reasonable hearts could reasonably disagree, so that you would have something engaging in class, but also something safe. And so I'm going to just feature one of the 17 roundtables, and it's one that I actually did with my own students right out there in the library, which I'm pointing to right now, which would look weird on your screen, I'm sure. We tried one of the online debates, which again, students are comfortable with that format. They usually do so on Facebook and Twitter. But I wanted to dive in to Parlay Ideas for the first time. I'd seen the platform, but it's the first time I've used it with my students. And we dove into SDG 3.3, which I need to say, it ties together with more than one subject. If anybody is saying that the global goals are for social studies, I would respectfully say that that's inaccurate. Certainly, any realm of science you can tie to. English, the kind of poetry and the kind of real-life stories you can review. But even mathematics, for those of you who are math teachers out there, as Hans Rosling and his work would demonstrate, percentages and trend lines. And, there's so many opportunities to deliver hope and math outcomes and engage students in serving the world all at the same time. So with SDG 3.3, as we zoomed in, it's about fighting communicable diseases, and we learned about malaria with a little starter question. What is the world's most deadly non-human animal? Because of course we humans are the most deadly, but most people don't realize that the second most deadly animal is the mosquito. And so we dove into a debate that surrounded the single question, which is whether or not we should wipe mosquitoes off the face of the planet, which you may be interested to know we're pretty much there when it comes to gene editing technology to do so. But there are some ethical questions around that. So it led to a really fantastic experience with my students. They were, to date, a little bit, shall we say, quiet in class. I'm sure many of you know you can put together a lesson and deliver it well and be so excited, and you go, oh yay, that was a great video and great reading. But getting a 17-year-old to actually share is a challenge, to say the least. So after reading the introduction, which you see a little bit on screen, watching a few of the short videos, and I tried to select ones that were 10 minutes long, and also the explainer type with lots of graphics, the Vox Explainer series, and the In a Nutshell series, also known as Kurzgesagt, the unpronounceable word that maybe you've seen before. If you search In a Nutshell on YouTube, you'll find them. So I put a few of those videos in and a few readings, and it's important to note that the readings are not steered towards one side, or at least they shouldn't be, so that again there's an unbiased focus on multiple perspectives. so that we're not telling our students how to think, but exposing them to the materials that might guide their inquiry. And that came down to the questions. So in this case, it was just a single question with three options. And my students, it was wonderful. They were on all sides and engaged in the conversation. I loved the feature where I could provide private feedback or public feedback. Students were able to flag a comment. I had one, shall we say, somewhat challenging student engage in just a little bit of name calling against, admittedly, one of his friends. I had to address that, but another student called my attention to it with a little anonymous flagging, and then the conversation took place, and we actually worked on how to engage in an online debate, which we know is really important to learn today. So it for me was a great experience. I look forward to doing more of them. It is a little bit strange to be walking them through these things since I know I created them, but it's also exciting content that I've drawn from so many other experts in this field. So I would invite you to check these out. They're free. They go deep. There are 17 to pick from, and it does call upon your students to provide some feedback and learn some essential skills. So that's my little plug for what really is my favorite resource out there now for engaging with the SDGs at ages grades 6 through 12. I would like to take a moment, right before we get to the question section. I'll do this rather quickly for the additional resources, because teachers often ask via the Twitter account for Teach SDGs or any of the members out there in our movement, what's a good place to start? Inspiring videos like the one I shared earlier, great place to start, especially with your students. For teachers, though, this is a 1-hour course from Microsoft that was made in partnership with Teach SDGs and the World's Largest Lesson. It is excellent. You'll learn everything you need to know about the UN, the SDGs, sustainability. Lots of the inspiring videos are embedded. So I would invite you to take a look. Empatico is a wonderful way to get your students talking with and learning with students all around the world. They make it super easy to reproduce those experiences that got me started in global ed, those live video sessions with kids on the other side of the globe. And they target ages 7 to 11, and they have recently aligned with the global goals for 3 of their lessons. Teach SDGs, obviously, you may wish to take the pledge or do what you can to spread our movement. As I said, we're all volunteers on a mission to get every classroom on Earth to use the global goals in some way. We know it's a tall order, but we're just getting started. And so many others have hopped in. World's Largest Lesson, they make extraordinary lesson plans for all ages. And they are funded to do this work. So it's a place you really should visit. Our World in Data, if you want to see trend lines that cheer you up. I'm so sad that we lost Hans Rosling far too young a year ago. But Max Roser at Our World in Data is really picking up where Rosling left off. The content is exceptional. Finally, a quick plug for the book Factfulness. Recently, some leaders from my school here in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, traveled to get together with other student leaders across Canada. And our Canadian astronaut, Chris Hadfield, commander of a mission on the space station once, was speaking to the group. And he was asked, if you could recommend one book for all of us to read, what book would that be? And Commander Hadfield said, Factfulness, because it will deliver hope and the kind of critical thinking skills that are necessary to counteract some of the powerful forces out there that are being a bit deceitful with truth, or powerful media sources that shine a light on the darkness instead of shining their spotlight on the stories that are more cheerful and actually more accurate. So I invite you to check out that book. And a final thought from me, this is urgent. I'm sure most of you saw the new report from the International Panel on Climate Change last week. That is one area that I can't smile at you and say, look, the numbers are better than you thought. There are issues in this world that are intolerable. Any amount of extreme poverty is intolerable. And I think personally it's a moral duty of educators to show the world to your students. We need them. We need all hands on deck to address these challenges. And if we're not learning about climate change and other challenges, what does that mean for our graduates? What will they be interested in? What will they be passionate about? I think they should be passionate about this. And I think each and every one of you can play a role in making that happen. And so the resources are out there. I invite you to jump in. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This is, again, a real honor and a pleasure. And thank you, Bobby, for hosting and making this possible.
Hey, thank you so much, Ada. Again, an amazing story, and it's been a great honor to work with you to combine your passion for knowledge of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the work that we've been doing and continue to do with inspiring, meaningful discussions in the classroom. Now, at the end of the presentation today, for anyone who wants to stick around, I'm going to do a quick 5-minute overview of how to get to the resources that we co-created for the Parley online Sustainable Development Goals resources. And we'll show you how to get to the Parley universe, how all that stuff works, and the content that Ada created. But before we do, and we still have 10 minutes now, so that's awesome, we can answer some Q&A. So if you haven't already and you have a question, please post it in the questions box in the top, and I'll pass it off to Ada. And I guess, Ada, if you want to just sort of go through the list and answer some of these questions. You're the expert on the SDGs. I'll definitely pitch in where I can.
I'm happy to field some questions. I'm just looking over on the left. Is that where I'm expecting to see them?
No. So if you go just at the top, you'll see like a little speech bubble, and it says "View Audience Questions."
Ooh. Click.
And then you'll see all the officially submitted questions. There are 10 of them. And you hit the little play button, and then it'll show the question to the audience, and then you can address it while the question is shown to everyone's screen.
Show question to audience. This is fancy. I'm going to start with this one. It's the first one on the screen. And I press play, and it still stays up there. Okay. I do. That was the quick answer. I'll tell a little story. Of a student 2 years ago who suffers from crippling anxiety, to be honest. She missed a lot of time. And, I had many conversations with her about, how she was doing. And one day she approached me at lunch and she said, Ms. McKim, can we talk? And I said, absolutely. And I knew that she probably wasn't doing too well health-wise. And she said, I'm really down today. I'm just feeling like the whole world is dark. And I said, well, what can I do? Like, I'm available. And she said, all of those hopeful statistics you shared the other day, could you share those again, please? And it was the best lunch hour I've ever had in my career, just running her through the stories again. I think we run from the world because we are expecting darkness, and the poll to start this webinar revealed that, and your polling data is no different than the university graduates of Harvard that Hans Rosling would test and find the same thing. Once you feel like things are more hopeful, and see that the global goals are a framework that you can plug any of your lessons into, you'll see that your students are interested in this. it's just about making sure it's not something that also makes them really depressed. I'm going in order for questions here. I thought I was going to pick which ones. Some different countries. Oh, yeah. I don't know if I could ever say that a few connections could defeat the nature of prejudice. But I certainly believe it is a step along the path. I saw it with my own connections to Uganda so many years ago. I see it with Empatico. And I think many teachers who work in the global ed space see this as well. How do we, I'll click that. How do we apply to become an ambassador? Great question. You head to the Teach SDGs website. For the third cohort, we're opening 50 spaces. I know we had about 80, 90 applications in the first 3 days. That one is now closed, but it's going to open up again, I believe, early in the new year. But to be honest, a teacher ambassador is somebody who, without any funding, does their very best to spread the resources, to spread the motivation. So really, you can unofficially be an ambassador at any time, and we desperately rely on such people. But formally, just do that application and jump in. We would love to have you. I'm going to try and see Bobby here. I don't know if the questions are all directed for me. Oh, here we go. This one's for you, Bobby. You'll be able to see that.
All right. Where can we find the 17 Roundtable resources? So I'll be sharing the link and showing you how to get to those after. We'll also be sharing a thank you email, a little bit of a wrap up, and you'll have a link to that as well after the webinar. So I'll share it with you now at the hour at 4 o'clock, and then we're going to send out emails with all the appropriate links and resources. So, and you can also go to parleyideas.com and go to the universe and click around and find them yourself.
Thank you. I mean, anecdotally, absolutely, I have. Our principal reports this as well about our school. Our superintendent talks about it for our district. But I always take the lessons of Hans Rosling to look broadly at the data rather than just with my own. And the data, they support this as well. It's not one of those good news stories. There are so many good news stories out there, but this isn't one of them. And I wish I had the research to prove that learning about a brighter world with an all-nation plan to make it even better produces positive effects. If any of you know any researchers that want to jump in on that, we would love to showcase that kind of longitudinal research. Thank you so much, Joel, for the compliment. PowerPoint slides and the record. I don't know, Bobby, I know that edWeb is going to be posting these.
Yep, there'll be a follow-up email as well from edWeb with access to all that information. So don't worry about that. And we'll share all the links and resources as well. Okay. All right, I think we have time for one more question. I've been instructed by the edWeb folks to try and wrap it up at least actually on the hour. I'll tell you what, we can actually go offline and answer these questions as well, and send the answers around in a nice, maybe probably just a Google Doc, realistically. And I guess maybe, Ada, if you want to pick the last question.
Okay, sure. I'm just scrolling through here. That's pressure. It's the last question. I'm actually going to take one that edWeb posted itself. Are adults counted in today's learners? If we take a macro perspective about how to get the Sustainable Development Goals and hopeful news and the motivation to do more as widespread as we can, then it really isn't just our students. What I often tell teachers is that, our students, if they're engaged with the content and are making, meaningful steps, taking meaningful actions in their local and global communities, they're going to tell their parents and guardians about this. They're going to engage the people around their dinner tables. And with that in mind, we're all learners. Every educator I know, myself included, and Bobby said earlier, I'm an expert on the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know that I am. I'm passionate about them, and I've learned some, but I'm constantly learning, as I know all of you are. Here you are at a webinar. So I really have to thank you for being learners today. And yes, the adults everywhere can be engaged with the global goals, and our students will do that job, and if we empower them to do so. Again, thank you so much. Thank you for the great questions, for the opportunity. Bobby and Diane over at edWeb, it's been lovely to work with you and to put this together.
Thank you very much, Ada. And thank you everyone who joined with us today. So just before we sign off, I'm really going to quickly going to show you just a very, very, very brief demo of how to get to the sustainable development discussion topics that we created in Parlay. And I'll give you a quick overview of what those look like and what a final sort of online roundtable in Parlay can look like. So I'm just going to share my screen really quick and make sure that everyone can see it. Ada, you'll have to tell me if it can't be seen, otherwise I assume it is. Awesome. So what I've done is I've gone to the Parlay Ideas homepage. So you'll see I've just highlighted there. ParlayIdeas.com is the name of the homepage. This is where you can sign up for Parlay and give it a try. The first class is free forever for all teachers. So if you want to try some of these discussions with the Sustainable Development Goals or otherwise, Parlay is free and open to you. Definitely encourage you to explore and click around. Where I want to draw your attention though today is the Parlay universe. So I'm going to click here. You'll see it's a new URL. It's universe.parlayideas.com. And here's all the roundtables that we've created with a very specific purpose of connecting the classroom to the events and ideas that are shaping our world. We've created some of our own. We have teachers from around the Parlay community in North America and even beyond who've created amazing content for us. The one that I want to draw your attention to today, of course, are the Sustainable Development Goals. And you'll see there's a filter here so I can click on the Sustainable Development Goals. And what this is going to do is bring me to a library where we have all the different Parlay online roundtable resources that Ada worked on and created. So you'll see one for each of the different Sustainable Development Goals. So if we go into the one that we talked about today, which is the humans versus mosquitoes, and we click on that, what we have is in effect a lesson plan that translates into a rich, meaningful, measurable conversation in your classroom by using Parlay. So you'll see the what are we discussing today, and that's the sort of high level overview of this target 3.3. Why is it important or relevant? As Ada said, this is what we use to really get student buy-in to explain the significance of what we're doing. Then we have the content and multimedia. So we have the targets for the Sustainable Development Goals from the SDGs website. We have information on malaria and the different videos about gene editing. And then we have those discussion questions. And then we have the peer feedback instructions for students. So everything is all in one place. And this is the actual prompt that you publish out to your students where they engage in the online roundtable. So this is the whole prompt. And let's say, you know what, I love this. We wanted to have this conversation in my class or a version of this conversation in my class. I very simply come up here, I press create roundtable. Now what it's going to do, if I already have a course, which I do, it's going to ask me to publish that to one of my classrooms or my sections. I can, of course, publish it. I can create an account as well. You can sign in with Google, and like I said, it's free, and or your Microsoft account. So that's very easy to do. But in this case, I already have an account, so I'm going to publish it to my philosophy class, press create roundtable, boom. It's now taken me into Parlay, and I have the prompt right here, ready to send to all my students. So I'm just going to minimize this here, and so we can focus in on this discussion. If I want to edit the prompt, I can do that too. So I simply press the edit button. I can change anything, add things, remove things. This is a great discussion topic that's really rich and has a lot of resources. If you want to add or remove anything or change the questions in any way, you're free to do that. So you can use it just as a starting point as well. Then you have there are some configurations that you can set up here for formative assessment and for anonymity and secret identities in the discussions, and guidance questions to help students get better peer feedback. Again, all of this, if you play around with Parlay or look at some of the videos on our how-to page, you can learn about all these things. And then finally, you can invite students. And so if you invite your students, you can invite the students who are in your class, you can share a link with them, or you can share via your Google Classroom by hitting this button. And if you do that, the students will see the link, they'll click on the link, they'll create an account, and they'll sign right into the discussion, and you can have them responding to these rich discussion prompts and engaging with one another and building on each other's ideas and challenging each other's ideas. And then as a teacher, you'll have all that rich data and all that conversation in one place. Trying to obviously be cautious of time here, and just so you know, I'm going to flip forward into a discussion that's already in full bloom. This one's about identity and social media. But if I scroll down, I can see the prompt and then all the different student submissions. Amelia Earhart's submission, Nikola Tesla's submission, Jane Austen's submission, and I can see all the different comments that were provided on all of these. So I can see what Nikola Tesla's peers said about his comments. And I can expand to see his whole submission to our discussion prompt. I can also come up here and see really awesome graphs and visuals that understand the relationships between students. So in this case, I can see the relationship between Jane Austen and Nikola Tesla in the conversation. I can also go up here and see an automatically generated word cloud, which pulls all the main ideas and concepts from the discussion. So there's lots of really great features in Parlay, and it's a platform that, when paired with the Sustainable Development Goals, really does transform your classroom into a place where not only students can explore and understand these goals better, but they can have discussions and debates and conversations and build on each other's ideas and challenge each other's ideas in a respectful way, and really dig deep into the material. So I'm going to leave it at that. Like I said, if you want to sign up for Parlay, we'll be sending around email invitations as well. Don't hesitate to give it a try, sign up, log in, send us a message at any time. My email is on the screen earlier. It's bobby@parleyideas.com. Happy to help anyone who'd like to try Parlay in their classroom. And with that, I know we're a few minutes over time, so I'm going to stop my screen share. And thank you to everyone for being a part of this presentation today. Really excited to keep the conversation going and just keep focused on empowering meaningful discussions and empowering for meaningful discussions about the Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you again, everyone, and thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, and don't forget to do your quiz.
Right.
Thanks, Bobby and Ada. That was wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Just to recap, to get your CE certificate for this webinar, if you are a member, your personalized certificate will be posted to your homepage by the end of the next business day. If you've logged in with your email address, we'll email you links to a CE certificate form, the recording, and how to get added resources. You only need to take the quiz if you've dialed in by phone or if you're watching this as a group. We hope you will join the student voice-free professional learning community on edWeb. You'll be able to watch a recording of this fantastic presentation. You can download the slides. You can join in the online discussions. If we didn't get to your question today, you can post it there and start a discussion with other people. And that's it. Again, thank you, everyone, for joining us today.